Well, we made it through week 1. 17 more to go. First up on the docket for week 2, we got the Bills taking on the Dolphins. A very shaky start of the season for both of these teams, but in the end, they did what they had to do to come out with the win, and now here's the first big test for both of them. Now for Miami, their offense started out really slow, and they struggled to get the run game going. But despite having 400 total yards of offense, they've only converted half of their third downs. Now for Buffalo, it looked pretty scary for them at the beginning, falling behind Arizona at home. But after the first drives were stymied by turnovers and penalties, this team would roll on for the remainder of the game. And even without Diggs and Davis, Josh Allen still took control of the game with his arm and with his legs. Both teams still have some pretty big questions on their defenses, so I would expect this game to be a shootout. But seeing how Josh Allen has played against the Dolphins in his career, I'm going to give this game to the Bills in a high-scoring but very close game. Now starting off the Sunday slate, we got the Raiders taking on the Ravens. What am I really supposed to say? They both have the same record, but for completely different reasons. Ravens are good, Raiders are ass. Really shouldn't take too much analyzing to figure this game out. The only thing I have is hopefully the Ravens start getting Derrick Henry more involved in the offense and get him used to this system. Ravens by 30. Next up, we got the Chargers taking on the Panthers, and you could probably just copy and paste everything I said about the last matchup. I know it's still too soon to tell, but I'm not very confident in Bryce Young. In all of last year, the points were made that, oh, he had a bad coach. Oh, he has a bad offensive line. Oh, he doesn't have great weapons. But it feels like the team as a whole kind of just lost their way. And as for the Chargers, they won, but it's not super convincing considering who they played against. Maybe with another bottom feeder like Carolina, especially since they got rid of Brian Burns in the offseason and lost Derrick Brown for the year, I can see them taking complete advantage of this team all day long. So give me the Chargers blowing out the Panthers. Next up, we have the game that I will be attending. It'll be the Saints taking on the Cowboys. Both of these teams coming off very dominant wins in week 1, but the biggest contrast in both of them is the quality of their opponent. Dallas dominated a Cleveland team that was coming in with the number 1 defense from a year ago, albeit Deshaun Watson was complete doo-doo. And New Orleans comes in off of a win against the Carolina Panthers, who basically bent over and gave them anything they wanted. On Dallas' side, I feel like as long as they get the run game going, it'll open up the passing game, and that's where they'll be able to dominate, considering that's what they do best, especially at home. For New Orleans, going from the Panthers defense to Dallas' defense is quite the jump. Keep in mind, half of Cleveland's plays went for negative or no yardage, so good luck with a defense that'll actually put up a fight. But obviously, I'm going to go with Dallas, and they're going to shut down all the Saints hype. Next up, we got the Buccaneers taking on the Lions, and wow, this could actually be the game of the week. Obviously, a rematch of last year's NFC divisional round, but both of these teams started out the season on a very high note. Tampa Bay coming in off of a clinic against Washington, and Detroit coming in off of an overtime slugfest with the Rams. Now, the team that's going to be at the biggest disadvantage is probably going to be the Bucs. They've sustained so many injuries in their secondary just last week. And with the Lions riding off of what Jameson Williams has done, and with this being the game that'll get Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta rolling for the first time this season, I'm going to take Detroit to sneak this one out in a high-scoring game. But at the same time, I also expect Baker Mayfield to build off of what he had last week. Next up, we got the Colts taking on the Packers, and this game would have been a lot more interesting if we knew Jordan Love was going to play. However, it looks like he's probably not going to suit up for this one, so it's not going to take a whole lot of analysis to cover this one. Last week, the Colts showed that they are actually what we think they could be, as they took the Houston Texans down to the wire. For Green Bay, they're going to be rolling out Malik Willis, and he hasn't had a defining moment in his career that would give anybody confidence that he could lead his team to a victory this week in Jordan Love's absence. So give me the Colts to win this game comfortably. Next up, we got the Browns taking on the Jaguars, and this is a game that both of these teams need desperately. Now, Cleveland, if I hadn't said it enough, just came out completely flat against Dallas last week. Couldn't get anything going on offense. The defense did everything they could to contain Dak Prescott and that Cowboys offense. But in the end, it all hinges on Deshaun Watson and his inability to perform at this point of his career. There's a little bit more optimism for Jacksonville, considering that they held the high-powered Miami offense to 20 points. Now, as long as Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars offense are able to get things rolling, I don't see how there's any way that they don't cruise to an easy win against the Browns. Next up, we got the 49ers taking on the Vikings, and Minnesota, it was fun while it lasted. Clearly, the Vikings were out of their element last week when they played against a very putrid Giants team, but now they have to host a 49ers team that basically just bitched the Jets' vaunted defense. Without Christian McCaffrey, I mean, maybe the Vikings would put up a fight. I just can't think of any way that they would be able to beat this San Francisco team, although they did last year on primetime. But I'm going to have the 49ers absolutely obliterating the Vikings and have this be my lock for this week. Next up, we got the...
Yes, sir! Y'all know what it is. Pat's defense shut down Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense. Call that shit a no-fly zone. The Pats are undefeated and they'll stay undefeated. Now time for the Seahawks, or should we call them the Seahawks? Their fucking defense struggled against rookie Bo Nix. Man, get that shit out of here. Geno, more like Hino, scored touchdowns.
Who keeps letting him do that? Anyways, we got the Seahawks taking on the Patriots. If I told you both these teams were 1-0 and one of their wins was impressive and the other one not so much, which one would you think I'm talking about? If you thought New England's was impressive and Seattle's wasn't, you're absolutely right. The Patriots went into Cincinnati where they were huge underdogs and just straight up dominated Joe Burrow in that offense and came away with a 16-10 win, riding off Ramondre Stevenson just bullying the Cincy defense and Jacoby Brissett keeping the game in hand. Meanwhile, on the Seattle side, you would think that they were tanking themselves. 2 first-half safeties and a couple of turnovers? That is not a recipe for success. But looking at both teams, they're both middle of the pack in terms of offense, but both are also in the top end in terms of their defense. This game's going to be highly competitive and a very tight affair, but I think once Seattle starts getting more comfortable in Mike McDonald's system, there shouldn't be any doubt that they can come out with a win. So give me Seattle by just a score. Then we're going to have the Jets taking on the Titans, and I think fans are a little worried right now on both sides. The Titans started their game with 17 straight points, but still ended up losing, despite the defense never giving up an offensive touchdown, basically because of Will Levis giving the ball to the Chicago defense. For the Jets, I'm pretty sure everyone expected Aaron Rodgers in this offense to move a little bit slower, considering this is the first time they've shared the field together in over a year, but their main concern comes from on their defense, who was supposed to be a top unit in the league this year, giving up 8 straight scoring drives against the 49ers. And I know it is the 49ers, but that's really not an excuse. I expect the defense to at least bounce back this coming week, and maybe the offense starts to build a little bit of momentum from that. So I am going to pick the Jets to barely squeak this game out. And for the last game of the early slate, we've got the Giants taking on Washington. This game is going to end up with the 14-7 final score, but in Washington's favor. From what we've seen from Washington in the first game of the year, it looks like their offense is kind of onto something. Definitely not as bad as a lot of people would think. And this just gives Jaden Daniels another chance to improve and get this offense rolling. While Washington's defense is a big question for me, against this Giants team, it'll be good enough. They can't get shit going. I don't mean the entire offense as a whole. I think Jalen Hyatt and Malik Neighbors can both be really good, and Devin Singletary is serviceable, but Daniel Jones fucking sucks. He's so bad. Get ready to learn Chinese, buddy. Next up, the first game in the late afternoon slate, we're going to have the Rams taking on the Cardinals. Out of all the games for me to predict this week, I think this one gave me the most trouble. Arizona came out hot in Buffalo, but weren't able to close it out at the end. Meanwhile, the Rams just took the Super Bowl contending Detroit Lions into overtime. The Rams are coming into this week dealing with a lot of injuries. So if Arizona can come out hot, I feel like they have a pretty good chance to win. But we just saw Matthew Stafford run this offense with all the injuries they've had. Plus, the defense did a really good job of slowing down that Lions offense. So give me the Rams to sneak this one out. Next up, we got the Steelers taking on the Broncos. And whatever country you're in, let's ride. Well, no, because Russ isn't even going to play. What good is a revenge game if you can't even be on the field? Speaking of fields, Justin was semi-efficient last week. 200 total yards of offense, no touchdowns, but no turnovers. As long as he does the same thing this week and just let TJ Watt and the Steelers defense wreck the game, this should be a very easy win for Pittsburgh. But it could be a trap, so tread carefully. Next up, we got the Bengals taking on the Chiefs, and a little bit of a different vibe from what we would get from a Mahomes-Burrow showdown. There's speculation and concern that Joe Burrow may not be 100% healthy, and it was clearly evident as the Bengals offense completely struggled last week. The Chiefs are coming in off of extra rest, but also off of a statement win over one of the elite teams in the NFL. These games are usually always decided by a field goal, but this time around, I don't think the Bengals defense is on the same page. And of course, as mentioned, Cincinnati always starts the first couple of weeks very slow, so I'm going to have the Chiefs winning this game pretty convincingly. Next up, on Sunday night, we're going to have the Bears taking on the Texans. And this is a game where we kind of don't know what to expect. We expect fireworks from both of these young quarterbacks. By the way, Chicago and Houston need to go half and half on a gift basket for Lovie Smith. This week, I would expect Caleb Williams and the Bears offense to pick it up and actually get in a rhythm, while their defense should do everything they can to keep CJ Stroud and that Texans offense contained. Now for Houston, It's prime time. From what we saw last week, they are easily a contender in the AFC, so I have no doubt that if they keep feeding Nico Collins and feature a lot of Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs once again, they can come out with another close win against a really good defense. Give me Houston in a very close one-score game. And to wrap up week 2 with Monday Night Football, we've got the Falcons taking on the Eagles. And believe it or not, this is the 3rd year in a row where Kirk Cousins has had to play in Philadelphia in week 2 in prime time. Coincidence?
I think not.
Now, Atlanta's play calling wasn't very good last week, and they definitely struggled against that Pittsburgh defense. But the Eagles themselves are also pretty shaky. All in all, I just feel like the Eagles have a better roster and look better against a more quality opponent. So I'm going to have the Eagles winning this one at home and put Atlanta in a tough position to start this season. And this is going to be a quick wrap up because I'm cutting it really close to Thursday Night Football. But tune in for the recap next week and feel free to let me know which picks you think I'm wrong on. With that being said, see you next time and keep it true.